Hi, I'm Jerry from Dr. J's Restoration RX in Lebanon, Oregon, and today we're talking doors. First thing we'll do is remove all the trim pieces here to give us access to the inside of the door. And then we'll continue on by removing the vent window. And then we'll take the lower panel that covers the hinge bolts. We'll take it off because eventually we're going to be taking off this door. The next thing I'm going to do is take out this felt channel. Now sometimes this is screwed in. Originally they actually used some clips to clip this in. Not practical to do today. But this one's already loose, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull it out. And then I want to show you the retainer that is down inside the door so that you can see what to expect. Now this one didn't have the retainer on it, but the retainer is just like this, and it bolts to the outside of the door by these two bolts here. So this would be sitting in here like this. You'd take these two screws out, that would loosen the bottom side of the channel, and then you should be able to pull your felt channel out. Now we'll go ahead and take out the vent window. There are two 1/4 inch bolts here, and then there's some smaller sheet metal screws down in here that we have to take out. Now these are normally clutch head bolts, but sometimes you'll find that there's just Phillips head bolts in this area. So I'll begin taking those out now, and then there's one more bolt that holds the bottom of this post down inside the door. That's a little bit more difficult to deal with, and we'll get to that after we get these bolts out at the top. These are also clutch head bolts, these 1/4 inch. Now I'll change bits. And I'll take these out. These are just small number 8 clutch head sheet metal screws. That one. That releases the top section. Now the last thing that needs to be done is we need to take the 5/16 bolt out at the bottom of this post, and it's a really difficult area to get into because it's up about this level. So what I use is a ratchet with a 9/16 socket on it and a long extension that gets you just about to that area. And then you'll be able to unscrew it, provided it's not so rusted you can't get it out, and I've run into that before. Now I'm going to use these two extensions to get up to this bolt in this area, and what I ended up doing is using a longer one and a shorter one, and that gets me just about into the midsection of this. Normally you don't have this hole in the door, which gives me a little bit of a cheating access, so I'm going to go ahead and use that to line me up. But sometimes you have to actually get a flashlight in there and feel your way up into that bolt to get it out. Probably one of the more difficult things to do in this door because of the access. You gotta find the bolt first and then just keep unscrewing it until you get that bottom bolt out of there. After a little penetrating oil, I was able to get the bolt out of the bottom of the post, so now we're ready to remove the vent window out of the door, and we can just maneuver it past the roll-up window, and after we get this out, we can pull out the roll-up window. So there's our vent window. This is the bolt we just took out at the bottom. Always a lot of fun to take that one out. And now we can take and restore this vent window. This door didn't have a piece of glass in it, so I'm going to try to simulate what we're going to do to get the glass out. Basically, all you do is you roll up the glass, the window with the sash channel assembly up to the top, and then you'll slide the window and sash channel assembly out at one time. So I'm going to roll this up like this, and just you'll have to pretend there's a glass in here. Roll this up like that. That'll get it almost to the top, and then the whole glass assembly should slide up off this wheel that's on here, and you should be able to remove it without a problem. Now I'm going to take the door regulator off the door. In order to do that, I need to remove these 3 bolts. And in order to get to this top one here, because it's totally covered by this arm, you need to latch this. So I'm going to latch this all the way in the latched position, put this on here, and that allows me to get to this 3rd bolt. On this particular truck, they're clutch head bolts again. If you don't have a clutch head bolt screwdriver set or socket set like this or ratchet set like this, the filling station has these either in hand screwdrivers or the tips, I believe. If not, you can get them at your hardware stores generally. You might have to order them online. But when you're working on these old trucks, you want to have clutch head drivers. Now that these bolts are out, the hole in this is oblong, so you have to swing this up and then you can pull this off. On this particular truck, the window regulator seems to be working really well, so I'm not going to remove it. But if you were to need to remove it, to replace it, repair it, or whatever, these bolts right here, which are also clutch head, you would take these out. There's 4. This one, this one, this one, and this one. And this is on a 52 pickup. They could be different on different years. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take and remove the door latch, because I want to look at it, maybe replace it if it looks too worn, or try to repair it, one of the two. And then we'll take the outer door handle off. Now we're going to remove the 3 screws to remove the door latch. Again, these are clutch head screws. They're flat heads so that they sit flush here in the sheet metal. And now I'll remove the latch from the inside of the door. And there's our latch. We'll check it out and make sure it's good enough to reuse. If not, there are reproductions that the filling station sells. Inside the outside skin of this door, and all the doors from 47 to 55 Chevy First Series trucks have a rubber strip like this that lays up against the outside of the door window to keep debris from falling in. What you need to do is get the old rubber strip out of here. And usually it's extra crispy, so you have to chunk it out piece by piece. And then this piece slides in, and it goes basically from the window channel up to the post of the vent window. So you'll have to cut this to length to get it in. But I'll show you how I get these things out when they're really crispy like this. They don't want to just pull out. So I'll show you that in a second. One thing I want to mention is there are a couple of reproduction rubber strips out there that look like this, but this is the correct configuration that you want to have. It's kind of like a Y. There are some out there that look like a T, and that will not work in these doors. So if you find somebody trying to sell you those, just tell them no or return them or whatever. But right now what I'm going to do is take out this strip, the old strip that's in here, and I'm going to have to do it just chunk by chunk to get it out. And there's a little gap right in here where you can get this thing started, and you can take it out piece by piece. And usually it slides pretty easily. And if you're lucky, it's still pliable enough to where you can just pull it out of there, but this one's not gonna be that way. So what I do is I just chunk it piece by piece and let it fall to the bottom of the door. If this tab is in your way, you can just, what I did is I just took my screwdriver and bent it down to where you can get it out of your way. Now you can see this track is wide open. If you're going to paint and you want to get this protected, this would be a good time to do that. On this truck, he's going to do all this later, so right now all I'm going to do is get the doors functional. I want to get this strip back in there, which means I'm going to have to cut it to length, and then I'll just slide it in one side. Basically what I'll do is I'll take it and slide it in like this, all the way to one side. And once I get it back in that area, you're not going to be able to slide it into both sides. So what I do is I just get it in place, and then I'll tuck it in with a screwdriver. And it's wide enough to where it shouldn't be a problem. Like so. And then once I figure out how long this needs to be, I'll cut this off to length. The filling station sells this in a length long enough for the earlier trucks when you don't have a vent window. And if you have a vent window, then you just cut it to the length that you need once it gets up to the post and back to the felt channel. On these 52 to 55 first series Chevy doors, they have the push button handles, so there's just two screws that hold them in. Again, on this truck, they're clutch head screws. So I will remove those two screws, and that will let the door handle, the outer door handle, just come off. So after removing these two screws, the door handle comes right off. There are pads that go in behind here that the filling station sells, so you'll want to replace those when you put the door back together. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the door hinge bolts. There's 3 here and 3 down below. They're a 3/8 fine thread bolt, both here and on the hinges here. And it takes a 9/16 socket and a ratchet to get these off. You can use air if you want. It's usually what I do, but for this, we're just going to do it with the ratchet. And I'm not sure these have ever been off of here. But I want to rebuild the door hinges, and in order to do the new weather strip on the doors properly, you really want to have these doors off of here, because getting down into this area and trying to glue weather strip to this front edge is just not practical, and for the most part not possible to get a good seal. You don't have to worry about this door falling off. These hinge bars are in pockets here, both on top and bottom, and they're not going to fall off generally. You actually have to slide this door off of these hinge bars. Now that we have all 6 bolts, releasing the door from the hinge bars, we can go ahead and pull the door off of here. It's not always the easiest thing to do because these doors have been sitting here for many years in a pocket that has had possibly a lot of rust in there. If you're lucky, it'll slide right off. Sometimes you really have to force them off. There. Once you get it to move, generally you can get the door off. And there we have it. Next thing we're going to do is pull the hinges out of the cowling area here, and that's just a matter of removing 6 more bolts. And I'm doing this because I want to rebuild these hinges. I have another video on rebuilding these hinges that you can look at if you look on my channel. These again are 3/8 fine thread bolts with 9/16 head. Normally you have to have this hinge in the open position to get it out of this pocket, this upper one, because you have some springs in here that usually make it a little bit difficult to get these out. So once it's in the open position, then it's clear enough to get that out, but it always wants to get caught right in this area. And usually you just have to kind of force them out. With a little strength, you can get them out. Here's the 2 upper hinges. A lot of times these hinges are either missing or broken. And that's why whenever I do one of these trucks, I always like to rebuild these hinges, weld up the holes where the hinges or where the springs go into the hinge bars. If there's any repair on these oblong holes, I'll do that at the same time. Knock the pins out, put oversized pins in them, and then it's just basically as good as new. Now we'll take the bottom hinge off. Good idea to replace these bolts with new ones if you can find them. If not, just clean them up and reuse them if they're still in good shape. If you're fortunate enough to get all 6 bolts out without breaking them, you're in good shape. Sometimes these bolts will break off in there just because they've been sitting there so long and they're rusted into place. Also, many times when I pull these hinges out or when I get customers' hinges to rebuild, the pin in this area can be broken, and you can't really tell until you start moving this and see that this moves quite a ways, and that becomes a real hassle to get apart because there's no bushings in these hinges. They're just metal to metal in here, and over the years the pin rusts to the bore of the hinge bar, and I usually have to use a acetylene torch to get this thing red hot and drive these things out of there in order to get the pins out. It's pretty rare when the pin will just punch right out with the drift. Normally I have to heat them up.